aspirants looking at editorials and question bank for 3rd November 2016. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper today is tight race in a divided country. So this is again regarding the US presidential elections, which will be contested this month now in November. The two candidates are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump representing the Republican Party and Hillary Clinton representing Democrats. So present government president is also from Democrats. Hillary Clinton was also the Secretary of State for Barack Obama too. So there are charges leveled against both of them. Donald Trump is a controversial figure. He has the Access Hollywood tapes which came out, in which he boasts about touching and kissing women without their consent. There are charges of sexual assault against him which have been cropped up right now to many women speaking about it after many years now. Then there is also his viewpoints on Muslims, on women, on African Americans, on Latins and differently abled, which are very controversial. Many Republican members from his own party have also distanced themselves from him. Then there are also some shady financial connections between him and associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So again, there are some shadiness seen here too. So he is not a trustworthy figure, is clear. Plus about Hillary Clinton too, the main charges which she faced are on Emailgate, as it is said, that while being the Secretary of State for America, she used her private server for sending emails. So there these emails have been leaked now and there are many controversial things coming out from that. So FBI director also recently, it was the news even yesterday, that he has come up with some fresh emails now which are again being investigated by the body. So these are the charges against them. Even Hillary Clinton has very close connections with some very rich people in the Wall Street, means in the financial markets. So then how her policies would benefit them is again a question. Again, her support even for the various schemes beneficial for the middle class in America, which will result in huge exchequer for the government and will result in fiscal expansion, means government spending will increase. That also is a little difficult to digest for all the people in America. So these are the issues which are facing each of these candidates. So let's see, we'll wait and watch. The elections will be held in November. So what are the results, we'll come to know soon. Then the next editorial is Green Farms and Clean Air. So pollution levels are very high in northern India, especially. Even about Delhi, we keep hearing of pollution in the air in New Delhi, and how it is not just because of the environmental emissions which are taking place in the Union Territory, but also because of adjoining states. Plus also adjoining states face high pollution levels. So the reason for these are many, and one of them which is highlighted in this editorial is burning of biomass. So what happens is, like paddy, rice which is cultivated, wheat which is cultivated, what happens is that the wheat crop, the useful beneficial part, the grains are cleaned and taken away, but then everything else is called crop residue which remains on the field. So all this crop residue, the procedure which is used to eliminate this is burning. So that is burning of crop residue, which is very high and which is environmentally polluting too. Plus it wastes the biomass. The biomass crop residue can be used for development or generation of bioenergy, electricity. So that is not done through that process, rather it is wasted. Plus environmental degradation, also health concerns because of the emissions take place. So how this has to be tackled is reasoned out here. Many states, Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, West Bengal, they top the list of burning of production of crop waste, and majority of it is burnt. So Punjab as a pilot project, it started. Even Rajasthan started a pilot project in which they were using biogas production units to composting of these bio waste would take place and energy would be generated. So that is what has to be encouraged. The farmers should be taught about conservative agriculture, because they indulge into burning because they have to clear the fields quickly so that the fresh seeds can be sowed. So the best way for them is this. But if the state facilitates this, it gives the provision, mandates it that crop residues have to be taken away. So transportation costs and everything involved, if the states take care of that, they provide biomass plants also in requisite places, then this problem can be eliminated of pollution plus also useful energy can be generated. So that is the point of view put up here. Next, we look at the question bank. We have picked up two articles from the lead and perspective page. Actually, the lead article today is again about presidential elections, so not important for us. The two questions which we have framed are, first one, who are contract or casual workers? Discuss their status and protection with respect to Contract Labor Act and judicial rulings. So this was in news yesterday too, and there is an article which has come up today. A recent Supreme Court judgment came about equal pay for equal work for contract and casual laborers. So we'll discuss an answer for this question. So first aspect, who are contract or casual workers? So there are three major differences which the article points out between permanent and contract workers. So permanent workers are a minority generally in various organizations, and even this judgment which had come, and the entire issue is of contract workers employed even by public sectors, government undertakings, government units, government departments. So that aspect is majorly highlighted. So apart from private sector, even government is a huge employer of contract and casual workers. So that is a major thing. So the main difference is that they get lower wages. First of all, they don't have job security. And the third and the most important difference which is highlighted here in this article too is that they are not part of the trade unions. So trade union membership being denied to them or being kept away from them results in further escalating their problems because they don't have a joint combined voice with which they can put their demands forth. So why this also happens that trade unions do not have contract workers as their members, except few minority which are pointed out in this article. Contract workers are not members of trade unions. The reason being that in various organizations, permanent workers are a minority and contract workers are a huge majority. So if they all become members and every member gets equal vote share, then the voting share of the contract workers would be much higher, and permanent workers who are having job security, higher pay will have lesser voice. So of course trade unions themselves do not want contract workers to be members in them, and plus they would also bear the brunt of the management. The management would be further alienated with the trade unions. They would not like it that contract workers issues are also taken up by trade unions. So why to get the ire of the management also, rather to keep them happy and keep the contract workers out. That's what the trade unions viewpoint is. So those are the aspects. Another aspect which is highlighted is that the management generally refuses to have any discussion or issues or concerns raised about contract workers because they are not directly employed by them. So there are these aspects which result in contract workers being alienated from trade unions too. The provisions which are there in place, first of all, is that the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act was formulated in 1970. So this was formulated because it was seen that contract labor, which is generally employed for peripheral activities, was employed for core production activities too over a period of time. So then the workers, permanent workers, protested that why contract workers are employed for core production activities too. So in response to that, this act was passed, and under this act it is prohibited that contract workers should not be employed for core production activities. For some peripheral activities it allows contract labor. So again, one aspect of this act is that it formalized contracts, that contract workers, casual workers can be employed for some aspect. And of course, once it is allowed, then contract laborers were employed, and these were called sham contracts. Means contracts were for some other work, but they were actually doing core production work only, and there is no compliance check, there is no supervision done, so visits done to the sites. So all those aspects, of course, regulation been missing, monitoring been missing, it results in misuse of this aspect too, and contract labor has further intensified. So that is what is seen. So the difference which Contract Labor Act points out is between employer and principal employer. So a contractor is an employee of the main employer, principal employer, and then that contractor actually employs contract laborers who work for the main employer. So all these aspects are there which are formalized now. So it further goes against the demands or the rights of the contract laborers. The recent Supreme Court judgment which we discussed yesterday too ruled that contract workers should be paid the same wages for the same work which they do. Not just because of their status as contract labor, they cannot be paid low. So if they're doing the same work as a permanent workers, they should be paid the same pay. So this goes against human dignity. This goes against further emphasizes on exploitative enslavement of contract workers. It says that they don't do this by their own free will. They are forced to do this. They don't have any other option. They don't have any way to raise their voice. So this is called enslavement by the Supreme Court in this judgment which it passed recently. This was discussed yesterday in news. So that's what we see. So now the Supreme Court has clearly ruled in favor of equal pay for equal work. So this was in context of government contract workers only, but then it is there in both aspects. It is there in private sector also. So of course the cue should be taken from this judgment even for private sector. So that is the aspect. The article actually says that just by having legislations, just by passing judgments will not ensure that contract laborers' rights are upheld, but rather there should be firm checking on the ground situation that whether the aspect of sham contracts as it is seen are not prevalent. So if all these aspects are checked, then it will ensure that contract laborers get same rights and are treated in the same manner as permanent workers. So that is the news here. Then the next article on which we have framed a question is the recent trend of cooperative sugar barons opting to set up private sugar units in Maharashtra despite overwhelming support of shareholders for the cooperative model is alarming. This when the entire country is looking to emulate the Maharashtra sugar cooperative model. Elaborate. So this is a statement. We have to elaborate on this. So cooperative model is in effect in Maharashtra for sugar sector. Sugar cane is procured and sugar mills are set up on cooperative model basis. So all stakeholders are part of it. Many of them are under prominent political leaders in Maharashtra too, that is clearly evident, but then many of them we see are now incurring losses, and because of these losses they are being sold off to the private sector, and these private sector owners are those same owners who are having the major stake in cooperatives. So they are trying to change this cooperative sector model and privatizing the sugar industry in Maharashtra. So because of this, what are the consequences of this and why is this happening is discussed. So in Maharashtra, first of all, is the largest producer of sugar in India. Cooperative sugar mills have contributed largely to the development of rural Maharashtra by providing consistent farm income to large shareholding members. So that is there, but then a change has happened in last decade. So this was the section 6A of the Sugarcane Control Order of 1966 was amended, and because of this now provisions have become stringent, and the loss-making cooperative units which were suffering were put under the lending banks. Practices were also questioned, that the money which was lended by these banks, especially by Maharashtra State Cooperative Bank, so how they have made them loss-making and they have put them under SARFAESI, an act which was passed in 2002, which is for securitization and reconstruction of financial assets and enforcement of security interest act. So this act actually provides for securitization, that the bank loans which are provided, they can be securitized, so they will convert into securities, and reconstruction of this financial asset which the banks hold. So based on this, now around 68 cooperative units were liquidated and sold to the private sector later. So this has happened over the years, and because of this now a number of private sector sugar factories have cropped up in Maharashtra. So from 2006-07 they were dismal, majority of them were cooperative units. Now they are very high, 45% of total sugar production in the state is by private sector. So earlier it was just 10% a decade ago, and in this one decade it has increased drastically. So why this has happened too is because private sector will of course take care of interests of the private entity which holds them, and the cooperatives have also farmers and large number of shareholders who all will be benefited. So what we see here is even statistically with data, there is fair and remunerative price which is paid to the sugarcane farmers in Maharashtra. So this price is decided based on the idea that the transportation of sugarcane from the field to the sugar mills will be undertaken by the private mill or the cooperative. So earlier it was cooperative, and wherever it is a private mill, then the private mill will undertake this. So these are called harvesting and transportation costs. Means harvesting from the field and transporting it to the sugar factory. So these HNT costs have increased under the private sector, and under the cooperatives it was low. So this shows, and of course this cost is also added up or deducted from the fair and remunerative prices. So eventually the money which goes in the hands of the farmers decreases if HNT costs increase. So even the same entity, same unit which was earlier a cooperative and now under the private sector, earlier HNT costs were low and now they have increased. So this is what the data also shows. There's a graph given here which shows this. So apart from this HNT cost, another is sugar recovery rate. So sugar recovery rate has also declined under private sector and it was high under the cooperatives. So this again shows that if recovery is low, then of course fair and remunerative prices will also be low. So this is how the private sector data also shows that rather private sector is inefficient, rather than the popularly believed idea that private sector is much more efficient. So this data shows that cooperatives were much more efficient. So this is how even farmers will not get sufficient remuneration under the private sector mills. So cooperatives have to be encouraged rather than the private sugar mills. So this is about the entire article here. So eventually it says that cooperative society members with easy access to management, meeting of the board of directors and vigilance on the factory premises during and after crushing brings in effective stakeholder participation in the overall working of mills. So the cooperative model is much more efficient and it has to be encouraged. So that is it for today. Thank you. You can download the PDF from the website. The link is provided in the description. Thank you.